The following program is an abridged audio version of the streaming video talk show, A Wonderful Chaos. The hosts are Andy Chaliff and Bambos Demetriou. The format is entirely casual, unscripted conversation. If you'd like to watch a live taping or participate with your comments in real time, subscribe to A Wonderful Chaos on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, or Twitch.
Everybody is really beginning to open up and share. So that is why I share my story. I want other people to take the weight off that it has been holding on to them, like how it's been that emotional bondage that they've been in, how they've been weighed down from that secret. Really, you gain so much courage and you release so much pain that was inside of you by actually sharing your story. And you can tell the difference between a healed woman and a woman who's still hurting. A healed woman, such as myself, can share the story. I could probably even crack jokes. However, a hurt woman, she begins to quiver. She feels ashamed. But once you heal from it, none of that stuff bothers you.
It's a wonderful chaos. Beautifully random. Messy and glorious.
Solo or tandem?
We work to find rest and fight to find peace. Both head and the heart.
Like a nephew and niece.
What are we doing here?
You mean listening to this show?
Where the more that you learn is the less that you know. Where the wounded are healed.
And the atheists pray.
It's a wonderful chaos and we like it that way. It's a wonderful chaos and we like it that way. It's a wonderful chaos and we like it.
So today, Andy, we have Erica Lynn Speaks.
And we have her. We're going to discuss an incredibly fun and fascinating item, which is when do we stop blaming our parents for our problems? And how does that shift fundamentally how we live? And what are we going to do that on, Bambos?
A wonderful kills, Mr. Chaliff.
And we like it that way, Bambos. Charles Demetriou. You know what's funny? Like a lot of times when I'm working, I'll say, and people laugh always, and I don't mean to say it as a joke. Like I'll just say, "Oh yeah, we're going to deal with mommy daddy issues."
Yeah,
like that's basically the statement I'll make when I'm either speaking or in a coaching session. And the humor is that everyone would say, "Well, it's not always about a mommy or daddy issue, right?" There's always that person who gets a little bit triggered by the idea that everything can be reduced to what you had with your parents.
Yeah.
But I have to admit that as I do my own coaching work for years, it's a very infrequent that it's not associated with mom or dad.
Yeah, I believe that.
And I think what's funny about it is that, as you know, the one parent that we blame is often the parent who we become.
Or attract,
right. In fact, in the book, in The Wounded Healer, you know that there was that chapter with Rocky. We can use her name because she was here and we talked about it with her, where she shared that I am my mom and it's effing great. Like the hardest thing for her to admit to herself were there characteristics in her mother that she judged, and she started to understand and see that was also part of her and that was okay. And I do believe that that's one of these moments in life when you begin to not make it personal, that we start to free ourselves of the baggage, right? If we're all carrying bags that are like weights that are just holding us back, like one of those weights is, the blame to a parent. Like when that blame is gone, there's just a lot more spaciousness. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thanks to you, I wrote a letter to my mother last year.
Yeah.
And I fully celebrated everything that I was judging in her.
Yeah.
As it was perfectly fine. And fully taking responsibility and even saying where it was in my life. And I remember when I flew back to Cyprus, she calls me, she's like, "You made me cry." And then she hangs up the phone. and then when I went back to Cyprus, I did notice a big shift in our relationship. And I think it came from me not needing anything from her.
Yeah.
or wanting her to be happy, and
Or
none of
be
that.
anything else
none
than
of
she
it,
was.
None of it.
Yeah.
If you want to be grumpy, you're my grumpy mama.
It's your prerogative. Isn't that what you're saying is, of course, we're talking about that with parents, but it's true for every single relationship in our lives.
Every single relationship. This is the thing I took away from spending so much time with you. You do you, I'll do me.
Exactly.
And we're going to celebrate each other even when we have our differences.
Yeah.
Like that's been such a.
I like that you put it that way. You do you, I'm going to do me. And if it doesn't work out, it's not a problem.
There's no blame. There's no
it's just
convincing.
It's just, and it might not work out over time either, because we change as well. So it's not even to blame. Like, no, you aren't the person you were a week ago. Who knows who you are a week from now?
And I mean, I think that's why you also say a lot of the times that you and your wife choose to be together every day.
Yeah. I always say that we're one day away from a divorce. And it's funny because you might think that's outrageous to say, but
no, it's beautiful to say.
But I believe it's really, like you say, I think it's beautiful, because what it says is, I'm going to dedicate to every single day. If there's something that isn't working for me, or somewhere where I might even get the slightest bit of resentment, I'm going to discuss it so that it never builds up into anything more. And the fact that I allow that to be taken so seriously means that, I mean, we don't have the big blow ups because I've repressed my feelings for weeks or months at a time, you know? Exactly. Which we see happen over and over again.
I've been guilty of that in the past years.
Yeah. Not anymore.
Not anymore.
I'm not allowed to project your past onto your current. That's what
exactly. You've learned. Only I'm allowed to do that.
I love
Andy, shall we bring the wonderful
Erica Lynn
sassy
speaks? Yes.
Erica Lynn speaks.
There she is.
Hi. Hello.
I love the colors, like the kind of burgundy brown with that green background. Like, perfect.
Yeah. Nice.
Thank you. I didn't even plan it. Oh.
What happens, Erica Lynn? Because in your name, you've already basically primed the fact that there will be speaking. What happens when you don't live up to that expectation and you just want to be quiet? Like, is that a problem?
No, it used to be before I really truly knew who I was. But once I walked into my purpose and really truly understand who I am and who I was called to be, then no, I don't have those problems anymore. In fact, I probably talk a little too much.
That's great. So you'd say that at some point you did change. So you added the name Speaks to your name?
Yes. Actually, my publicist and branding team did, because I was kind of all over the place. If you know anything about branding, what do people want to, know you as? You could do all these other things and wear a whole lot of hats. But when somebody think of you and hear your name, what do you want them to think of? And so I wanted to be branded as a speaker. However, my company is called One Step Beyond You. And so when you see One Step Beyond You, you know that it's taking one step beyond you. But who's taking one step beyond you? Who's going to take you there? How are you going to get there? And then the way it spelled, I didn't realize that it was just too much and so confusing. So it was spelled with the number one step beyond and the letter U. So I had to say that on every show. Make sure you go to onestepbeyondyou.com. And so when I hired my publicist and my PR team, and even in our meeting, she kept saying, how you said one step beyond or one step. And in my mind, I would be like fluttered, like, why can't she say it right? But at the end of the day, she was right. If your own team can't say it right, just imagine what the public is saying. How does she spell it? I can't go to her website and they totally forget it. So I learned that you have to have a name that rolls right off of people's tongue. And so when they're trying to find you and Google you, it's something simple and easy. So that was the whole process of being branded as a speaker and making it easy for people to find me as well.
I worked with a guy who every other month came up with another name for our business. And it used to drive my wife so crazy. She says, Andy, who gives a shit what your name is? Just pick one. Like that was, she was so frustrated with us. So I actually created the dumbest name I could think of. The dumbest. Which we never used, but just so I had one name that everyone, so I could put it on an invoice and people would say, okay, I can do that.
So you must share that name. I want to know what the name is.
The name was called Cubist.
QBIST.
No, I was in there. Yeah, QBIST. Question. Follow me here. Question-based interactive systems technologies.
Okay. And so you got me on this. You lost me after the second word.
Exactly.
Okay, I got you.
I dropped that name in the meantime, but at least that was. I understand the need to have your message so simple that it's easy for another person that they can tell another person. Because if they have to say, "Oh, it's one and then a you and not a you," that kind of stuff makes crazy.
Yeah.
And now I want to take us into another question. Tell us about you growing up. Like how old were you, and who was the girl that was not being able to take responsibility?
My government name is Erica Gillis. And as a young child, I just remember having this very smart, intellectual father. And everybody called him Mr. Gillis. And when you say Mr. Gillis, like it make you shiver. He was so smart and brilliant. Like he just had a brain that was beyond his time. But my mom and him would argue a lot because he was a visionary. He wanted to, he ran his own company. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. He never really wanted to work for someone else. So after coming out of the Vietnam War, they kind of all little tweaked up there a little bit. So he had to adjust to, regular life and having a wife with 4 small children and wanting to become an entrepreneur or living the life of an entrepreneur. And everybody knows that when you become an entrepreneur, it's very financially stressful. You don't have the dependency of the money from a 9-to-5 and insurance and all of that. So they would argue a lot about finances and other things. So they would break up and he would come back and blah, blah, blah. So one day I probably was about in the 4th grade and I came home from school one day and he was gone. But this time he wasn't coming back. So that really, really devastated me. I just remember sitting in the window some days waiting on him to pull up and he wouldn't come. And I was just like, wow, but I'm your little girl. I miss you. I want you to be a part of my life. I want to call you and do those daddy daughter things. But unfortunately, I didn't have that. So that set me in pursuit for always looking for love in other places. If you were a neighbor or a friend or a boyfriend or my mom or uncle, somebody, I wanted to take that father role. Yeah. I wanted someone to take me on my first date, pull out the chair, show me how a man is supposed to treat me, tell me I'm beautiful, pull my hair back when I put my coat on. But when they instill these things in you, then you're able to withstand when the knuckleheads come your way and tell you you're beautiful and I love you, and they don't really mean it because they have another ulterior motive. And so you don't just fall for anything. So because I did not have that, I gravitated to that. You showed me attention, I gravitated to that. So at the age of 13 years old, we had a neighbor that lived down the street from us, and he and my mother were friends. And she would say, go over his house and ask him to wash, go wash his dishes. He'll give you a couple of dollars. I wanted ice cream or whatever. And one particular day she said, have him take you to the store. I need some stuff for dinner. So we did that. And on the way back, I remember trying to get in the back seat. And he says, no, I want you to sit in the front. And I was like, nah, I don't want to. So anyway, I end up sitting in the front seat. And I remember sitting as close as I could to the door. And he says, why are you sitting so far? I said, because I'm looking out the window. And he says, no, that's too far. So he reached over and he pulled me closer to him. And back then, there was no center console. So it was just one long front seat. And I remember him gently pulling me closer to him. And then I just remember bracing my body as tight as I could, like I was an armor, that was my fortress. Well, needless to say that did not hold up against, an adult male. And he just began touching me and doing inappropriate things to a 13-year-old girl. So when I got home, I didn't tell anyone. I did give her groceries. However, I started running. I started running through life. I started running away from my problems. I didn't want to face, anybody. I didn't want to face my reality. I just ran. I ran away from a lot. I dropped out of high school when I was 16. At 17, I became a female dancer. I had my first child at 17 and got married at 19. And so through that first 10 years of marriage, it was abusive. It was destructive, self-abuse, verbal abuse. If he wasn't verbally abusing me, then my self-esteem was so low. I probably was verbally abusing myself. I didn't know how to stand up and fight for myself, all because of my experiences. So going forward, at 35 years old, I went back to college at 35. And once I graduated from college, I was so excited. I said, I'm surely going to land my dream job now. I'm off of welfare. I don't have to accept any public assistance. I can afford to take care of myself. Don't have to depend on a man to take care of me. I got this. And after the first year of being on my dream job, I cried every day for 1 year. I would go to work, sit with my back towards my coworkers, and I would cry every day from 8 in the morning to 11 in the morning, every single day for 1 year. So as a result of that, I hit rock bottom and went into a depressive episode so deep that I became suicidal, and I just wanted to give it all up. So yeah, so as a result of the rock bottom, I had to heal. Mm-hmm. And I realized that my rock bottom happened so much later in life because my foundation was broken and it was cracked. And all I did the same thing that a lot of people do. You just add everyday life onto a broken foundation. Mm-hmm. So that's jobs, kids, husbands, wives, promotions, owning companies, just everything that you do, school, you add all of that on to a foundation that you've never fixed in the first place. And when you do that, that causes you to hit rock bottom at some point in your life. And fortunately for me, when I hit rock bottom, that there was intervention that started to take place. So first of all, my father had my father had a heart attack. And my stepmom had contacted me. And she said, your dad is in the hospital. So we all rushed to the hospital. And at that time, I was married 2 times for my second marriage. And that one didn't even last a year. But that's another story. So anyway, I had put my second husband out 2 days prior. And when this happened to my father, I called him. I asked him, can he meet me at the hospital so that we could, show a united front? I don't know what I'm walking into. And he did so. And we had we laughed and just loved on my dad. So we left. He went home. I went home. So I waited a couple of days before I went back to the hospital. And I'm sitting in the hospital room with my dad. And I said, Dad, are you okay? He's like, yeah, Erica, he the way he talks, and he always use these big words that I didn't even know the definition to, by the way. But anyway, I said, Dad, if I tell you something, are you going to die on me? Or can you handle things? And he was like, sure. And I said, Dad, I want a divorce. And he was like, why do you want a divorce? You guys were just here the other day. Seem happy. I said, Dad, I put him out a couple of days ago and I don't like that fool. I don't like the way he treat me. I don't like, I just don't like him. I don't like the mental and verbal abuse in the relationship. And he said, so why are you taking it? I said, because I didn't want to let you down. I didn't want to let you down, let you know that your little girl has failed again at another relationship, that I've entered into the same cycle over and over again. And I didn't know how to get out of it. And he said, so what are you saying? I said, well, I have the divorce papers here in my purse and I just don't have enough courage to sign them. Mm-hmm. So what my father did for me was he began talking to me. He began pouring into me that day. He began loving in me, teaching me all the things that I wanted to learn from him all along. He began building up my self-confidence, let me know that I don't have to accept, abuse from men. And just really at that point, he began just building me up. And when I left the hospital that day, I signed those divorce papers and I popped them in the mail. And that was the end of that relationship, but was the start of my father and I, on our journey of loving each other. Then I went to Bible study. I went to a church that I didn't even belong to. Someone had said, well, go to this church. And I remember I went on a Sunday service and I was like, wow, it was really profound. So I went back for their Bible study. And after Bible study, Pastor Leon McDonald III from the Winter Circle Church. He had come up to me and he introduced himself. And no pastor really has ever talked to me, because I always went to like those mega churches where you got to stand in line to go shake their hand. So nobody really make a beeline to you to find out who you are, to find out if you really are broken and have pain. And so when he talked to me, I said, can I tell you something about me? And he said, sure. I said, I've been crying every day for 1 year. And he says, why? I said, I don't know, but it's really pulling me apart. So he prayed with me, gave me his personal cell phone number, and started sharing stories with me and scriptures with me. And from that point on, he and I built a relationship. And he was the first man that loved on me from the eyes of God, that didn't see me in a sexual manner, but just really wanted to uplift me and really truly help me heal on the inside. And that totally really began to change my impact and my outlook on men. I started beginning to see that all men are not bad. All men are not there for your ruin. And then there was one more man, because everything in your life happens in threes. Then I had a friend. He just flew. He called. He said, I'm in town. I hadn't talked to him in a long time. So can I come and visit you? So he came and visited me. And I was sitting at home in my rocking chair and just lifeless, not the same Erica that you see here. And so he kind of played it off, but asking intrusive questions. And so after he left, he said, something's going on with you. You're not the same person that I've known. What's up? And it took me about 4 or 5 days to really open up. And when I opened up, I just cried so hard, because I was able to share a secret that was eating me alive, that I held for so long. And when I finally opened up and shared that secret with him, and because he's like a jokester, he goes, now, did that kill you? And I said, no. And he said, well, suck it up. Let's get on with life. And so he just began to show me how to take the weight off of the pressures of life. And so that was the start of my healing journey. And as I went through that journey, I realized that there were some techniques that I've learned along the way. So if I have a depressive episode or want to regress, I've learned the tools and techniques that I need to catch myself to keep from falling. So in that process, I said, if this works for me, imagine what it can do for countless other people who deal with depression, who deal with life issues, daddy issues, mama issues, abuse, all of that. And so that is how I end up writing the 7 Techniques of Healing, because it is a self-help guide to help you not only heal, but walk you through your place so that you can begin to start playing big in your life. Go after the jobs you want. Go after that relationship. Don't be ashamed. Don't let somebody mash you down, but just honestly, really, truly own who you are and walk into your purpose. So that's a little bit about my story.
Erica speaks.
She's speaking. That.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. When you're speaking, I really feel every word just lands. Yeah. The start of your story, the moment you said you sat in that car, I just felt like I wanted to distance myself and contracted and
I was working with someone that from Cleveland, African American woman, and she once told me her daughter was in her 20s or something, and I always have fun, so I had fun and saw a picture of her daughter, and I said, oh, I don't know if I want to get married to my wife. That was the joke, which for me was just a normal joke, which I would tell everyone. And she reacted really violently to it, because she said, Andy, in the African American community, you can't make those jokes because the problems are so endemic that it's beyond just a joke. It's and when you told me, when you shared your story, it took me back to talking to her, because I wasn't aware that sexual abuse was so prevalent as she explained to me, in the African American community. And I assume is that something that that is true? Obviously you've had your own experiences, but is that something that you, as you encounter other people and discuss with them, is that something that you hear a lot about?
Absolutely. But the rate, it is very high in the African American community, but it's very high with women all across the board. It's just not talked about as much with the other races. But now everybody is really beginning to open up and share. So that is why I share my story, because I want other people to take the weight off that it has been holding on to them, like how it's been that emotional bondage that they've been in, how they've been weighed down from that secret. And when you tell somebody, you feel like, I'm going to be, I'm going to be ashamed. I'm going to be shunned. Nobody is going to talk to me. Nobody is going to respect me. And that's not the truth. Really, you gain so much courage.
Yeah.
And you release so much pain that was inside of you by actually sharing your story. And so I too felt that way. But once I released it, now I'm able to talk about it the way that I talk about it now. And you can tell the difference between a healed woman and a woman who's still hurting. A healed woman, such as myself, can share the story. I could probably even crack jokes. However, a hurt woman, she begins to quiver. She feels ashamed. She can't really give you all the details of the story because she's still seeing them impacting her right in her face. But once you heal from it, none of that stuff bothers you anymore. It doesn't bother you. But instead, you like, oh my God, I got to get out here and help somebody. I got to get out here and help free somebody else from this so that they can feel weightless and freed and walk into their purpose and open up a nonprofit or organization to do something to help someone else.
Yeah. A few weeks back, I came out with a book, The Wounded Healer. And basically a lot of the stories or people that come on, there's a commonality, an unintentional commonality, but something that clearly has shown up is that everyone has found the thing in their life that they've had to work through or work out. And then by doing that, then they've been able to support others who have suffered or had the same issues. This sort of moniker of the wounded healer is something that I certainly resonate with very strongly.
Have you heard the saying, hurt people hurt other people, but healed people help heal other people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. When you said the laughing part of where there's suffering, but after you come out of the back end of suffering, you can also laugh at it. That's one thing that in the book and in my sort of effort is to create a space where people who maybe took a thought very seriously are confronted with how life would be experienced if you let go of that thought completely and you say the thing that you're most shamed to say, or you have the most struggle with, or you have a hard time celebrating, and then you post, and it's fucking great.
Yeah. Okay. One of the biggest problems or biggest issues is really identifying what the root cause is. So if you take my story and break it down, what would you say, just for me asking you, what would you say would be the root cause of all the pain that I felt throughout the years?
I would say abandonment.
Yes. Yes. And you are absolutely correct. Abandonment caused me to go on this other path, and all these other things happened along the way. But that's just the same as a person that has a car accident, for example, and they experience PTSD. And as a result of that, a lot of things is happening, going wrong in their life. And you want to put it back on the car accident, which caused them PTSD. However, that accident just really actually pulled up some things that happened to them in their life prior to the accident even happening. So it's all kind of like a trickle down effect. And the goal to healing is, let's identify what the root cause is, because I can't help heal you if I really don't know what's wrong with you. And if we only heal part of you, then the other part is going to flare up later on.
when I'm working with a person or someone, a friend or someone in my life, and then they get angry at me, like really angry, then I'm looking like in a great compassion for, wow, they're showing me the 13-year-old or the 16-year-old or the 10-year-old version of themselves. So in a weird way, there's more trust I gain in them raging or whatever that anger looks like in them than if they're cosmetically pretending like things are okay when underneath I can see they're really not. I also don't blame anybody, because if I see the repression, then I'm like, I can't trust how they're going to behave anyway. So how can I blame them when the trigger hits and then they behave in some contorted, weird way?
Mm-hmm. And so the key is to just let's at least identify what the trigger is, so that you know every time that you do this, this is the result that you're going to get. And so,
yeah. I mean, and when I coach someone, the first thing I do is I spend maybe the first month only teasing that trigger in them over and over and over again, so they can feel into when it occurs, so that they actually can see a pattern that's forming that they weren't even aware of that was occurring. Bambos, by the way, is nodding because I've been doing it to him for years.
Okay. So he's immune.
I would actually ask you, how was it? It's curious. How was it for you, like to have someone intentionally do that for you?
It felt safe.
It felt safe.
It felt safe.
Okay. But by the same token, you must have seen me in some ways fucking with you, because I am in some level.
Yeah, but our relationship, the context that we had was so clear.
Okay.
That, and I respected you.
Mm-hmm.
And I trusted you. So if it was anyone else, I'd probably have their head off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bambos is always in the past. I'm speaking to the past. Bambos now the present. He would be very angry and verbally able to react quickly. So part of our journey together has been making peace with actually dad in this case, because both of our fathers were very abusive. Bambos's dad was more physically abusive, as far as I would say, than my dad. I don't remember actually being hit, but I was always yelled at from a very young age. Okay. So the pattern that both of us, I speak for me, but we've discussed on the show in the past, has been, how do you make peace with a part of you that's also like the father who you've judged for so many years?
Yeah. And so how did you make peace, or do you want to share?
Andy hosted a 15-month course. And in that course, that was the hardest time of my life. It was 5 modules, 5 weekends we stayed together. And in those 5 weekends, I shut down emotionally, like completely, actually.
Yeah.
Every weekend I came here. In one of the workshops, he poked the bear so hard, like he got scared, and this unleashing of everything that I've ever suppressed came out. And the space could hold it. And we were doing core energetics, which was also a way to release this old pain, shame, everything, just everything. And after this workshop, like I can't pinpoint the specifics, because it was the whole journey of our time together. I started to see anger as oh wow, I'm feeling anger right now. And I could take a deep breath and take a step back, and I'd see that I'm suffering. In fact, the anger was a reaction to the suffering. So from that point forward, it will be more like I breathe, I get in touch with the pain, and I allow myself to cry or whatever it needs to move through me. So anger has kind of become a friend in a way of indicating that I am suffering in a moment. It talks to me. And when other people are angry, I no longer take it personally anymore, because like, oh, they're suffering, so why would I add to that?
Yeah. And they just don't know how to express it in a different way besides showing a sign of anger.
Yeah. I mean, I did that most of my life, so I can completely empathize with that behavior.
Yeah. because I talk about the mean girl. So when some people see the mean girl, they go, whoa, she's such a bitch. But have you ever thought about why she acts that way, or what has happened to her to cause her to act that way? So instead of, if she responds, in a mean way, how about you respond to her differently? Sometimes people just need to know that you actually care. And so as a defense mechanism for all the pain and abuse and things that they dealt with, this is how they display it. Like, if I put up a wall before you hurt me, then now that stops you from hurting me. That's a way that anger is. So I've had that same issue with one of my children. Maybe he didn't know the answer, or he didn't want me to hurt his feelings, or he wanted me to back up off of him. So he would get real angry and riled up. And so my job was supposed to be, from his aspect, to bow down and walk away, right? Because he's angry. No, that's not how we're going to do things. I love you, and you're going to calm down, and we're going to talk about it. And so that was that. But I learned that was a pattern that he did. And I yell, he yell, I yell, he yell. So somebody blows up and it escalates to another level. But I said, well, wow, this is not working. It's not benefiting him, nor is it benefiting me. How can I do things differently? And I had to learn to come at him from a place of love, so that he don't have to elevate it, or he can let his defenses down. But that's the same as with you and other people. When you understand their problem, or want to even take notice or learn them or show them things that they've never experienced, then the response to you will be a whole lot differently than what you normally get. Yeah.
I was thinking, the question, going back to what was the thing that shifted for me when I made peace with my father, was he disowned me and told me I was dead, and gave me 30 minutes to get everything I own out of the house. It was very abrupt, and we didn't speak for 10 years after that. And then he somehow got, he was reconciling all of his life choices, and he ended up going into a kind of a mental insane asylum, but not so bad, I don't think. And he tried to call me from there. And at that time I was in business, and I had a secretary that took the call. And I said, I don't want the call, because every time I spoke to him, I would regress to the 13-year-old. And then it took like 6 months to recover. So if I spoke to him, he'd undermine any of the confidence. And it took me a long time to build that confidence up. And so I just said, she said, he's in a psychiatric ward. I'm like, yeah, just send it to voicemail. It's like, that's it. A few months after that I started to go on my own journey independently of him. So not trying to heal the relationship with my father, but make peace with myself. Because if the only way I'm at peace is to be away from my father, then that's not peace.
Right. That's
avoidance. What I had was this beautiful evening. I kind of remember the entire moment. It was my mentor at the time said to me, Andy, what did your dad do? And I went into the explanation of all the things. It's like an old story. I told the story so many times, it was like hardened. Like I needed the feeling that he was an asshole to justify me not talking to him, or me feeling the victim. That was a very strong need that I had for years. The 10 years, of course, we didn't speak. And then after we went through what he did and all this, and then I was in a much more open space in my life. And then the mentor at the time asked me, well, why did he do that? And then I just slowed down, and then I said, because he loved me. Yeah. And then even now I can cry because it was the first time I saw him. And maybe, quite honestly, the first time anyone saw him, because he was so abusive to so many people that no one wanted to have any contact with him. His sister, the uncles, like he was persona non grata.
Yeah.
So at that point, I called him and just apologized for not seeing him all those years. Yeah. And I think from him having been so abusive to so many people, he never received a call from somebody to apologize for not seeing him. It was so counter, and it was authentic. It wasn't constructed. It wasn't trying to get anywhere. It wasn't like, oh, I need him to hear this, so I'm complete. No, it's just now at least I want to give him that because now I see there's something that I could take responsibility for.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking while you're talking. When you take ownership in the part that you play, because every relationship has two parts to it, their part and your part. When you take ownership to the part you play, then at least you did what you were supposed to do as a human being to open up the doors to building a relationship. Even if the other party does not reciprocate, the fact that you took ownership and apologized and did what you needed to do, it really did free you. Yeah. Because you're saying, hey, I did what I could do. Now it's up to them. But if they don't want a relationship with me, that's fine because I did what I needed to do on my part. Yeah. And so kudos to you. I
think before that moment you're speaking towards, I always use labels, even if they're limited, but there's a degree of codependency. Because if I need you to react in a certain way so that I feel like I'm seen or heard, it's still a dependency.
Correct.
It's not really unconditional love. It's still, I love you, but I need you to love me back this way so I feel like it's okay, or whatever the feeling is.
Just hearing Andy share his story about how the conversation he had with his father, what was the conversation you had with your father to kind of take your responsibility and let him take his?
Well, we had we were sitting at the table because the day from the hospital up to 3 years before he passed on Halloween of 2017. And so for those 3 years, I would go back and forth to his house or to the hospital because he had ended up in the hospital several times. And I think he passed like 8 times from then till then. And so when I felt that he was strong enough, we really had a talk. And I was just telling him the things that he did, how it hurt me. I shared with him what happened with the neighbor. From his perspective, he blamed my mom for everything and really didn't want to take accountability for his part. And even till the day he died, he still didn't want to take responsibility for the things that he did. It was always on her. Yeah. And she was the same way. However, she went through her healing and became woman enough to own the things that she did. So she feels released. He, on the other hand, so the same kind of with you, I had to speak my piece, own the part that I played, but really truly tell him, because sometimes people don't know how they hurt you. You just assume that they know. So I'm saying, okay, as a result of you leaving, this is what happened to me. And I began sharing with him everything. And I began to feel so free because what that did was for those next 3 years, we just loved on each other. Like, I think I probably spent Christmas with him like one time throughout the years, like before I was, and so I went to his house like 2 Christmases in a row, spent the night. My kids, they were all like in other countries. And so I was just like hanging out with him and his wife. And it was really beautiful because my father kept us away from his life. Yeah. And that was because of his pain and his anger towards my mom. He always felt like if we were included, that it was somehow self-sabotage the things that, he was trying to do. And we always felt like, we used to say when we was like, oh, he liked her family better. And so my father is African-American, obviously, and his wife, she is Italian. So we felt, and we didn't know that he liked white people better. That's just that was our take on it. But when we got older, we learned that she actually gave up her family for this Black man. And so in return, he said, if she can give up her family for me, then I'm going to give up the things that will cause pain and hurt into our relationship for her. So both of them gave up people that they love for each other. And so being able to truly understand their story and why they did it, which really doesn't necessarily make it right, but it's why they did it. And so we both were able to gain some peace from understanding each other's story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you know your mom was difficult, so he had a reason not to be there.
My mother was a fighter and a cusser. And
I just wanted to have some fun. I'm sorry. I just wanted to have some fun.
I had my mother is this little lady. She fought all the time or cussed you out all the time. And so that was one of the reasons why I didn't tell her about the neighbor, because I felt like she'd be down there trying to fight him and end up in jail, and I would lose her parents. And so there was times that when I would see them arguing as a little girl, I saw my mother being the aggressive one.
Yeah.
Throwing water on them and just, being the violent one. But that was a result of her childhood and the things that happened to her. And so it is true. You are correct. And so we laugh about it because there's no weight and no pressure off of it. Work.
I cautiously use jokes like that with people I feel like I can do that with. So the fact that I don't know you as well as a lot of guests that come on, I do much worse on normal shows if I can.
He does.
Candid Johnson. Do you know Candid Johnson?
Yes, I do.
I like the name Candid. That's kind of like so similar to You Speaks. So I would expect for her to always say what's on her mind.
She does.
She says, you want to read it?
Erica Lynn, that's exactly how I feel about certain members of my family sometimes. Just rather avoid it, but that is not peace. This came up when you were talking about the part with Case.
Yeah, you know what I find interesting about that is I wanted to put a caveat on that, because then there's two sides to this story. That's one side. But the truth be told, there's people in your life that you don't want to spend time around. And that doesn't have to be avoidance. So the same experience could be two ways. It's like, I love them, but I just don't need that in my life. Or I actually can't be around them and I hate them. And so it's almost, in this first version, there's compassion for me. Like, oh, I also get to have the peace of mind to say, I don't need to meet that person, which doesn't mean they're a bad person. And I think that nuance is really important, because some people do self-sacrificing well. In their entire lives, they give to the family, sacrificing themselves, not seeing that they're not being served. So I also like to say, you cannot have contact with someone and not be avoiding them.
Yeah. I learned that you teach people how to treat you.
Yes.
So if you are in a family that has toxic behaviors and you deal with it, then you're telling them that it's okay, right?
Yeah.
And when you show people through your actions, you don't have to get loud, you don't have to yell, you don't have to try to prove anything to them. But through your own day-to-day actions, you teach people how to treat you. I'll give you one example. Remember I told you my mother is a cusser, and I never really would stand up to her because we had our own issues. And so I had gone through my healing process, and I'm walking into this woman who you see today. I have to help people all over the world, but I got to be able to deal with my own mom, right? So we were having a conversation, and I said something that she didn't like. It wasn't disrespectful, but she just didn't like that I said no. And she was like, I'll get up and F you up. Now, my mom is 70-something years old, by the way. And so it's like, I'll F you up. And I was like,
I love it.
And so I'm like, okay, you do know that you don't have to talk to me like that we can have a conversation. Oh, don't say that. I'm your mother and da-da-da-da, right?
Yeah, nice.
And so I said, okay, gotcha. And I got up and I began walking to the front door. And she ran to the front door and closed the door. Don't you walk out. I'm talking to you. I'm your mother. I didn't raise my voice. I turned around, walked back in the kitchen. My sister was coming out of the basement. And I was like, hey, girl, how you doing? Da-da-da. That let her guard down and she walked away from the door. Then I politely walked out of the door, got in my brand new car, and I drove off. And she was like, well, why did you leave? I said, I no longer will accept, because I told her you will not talk to me that way. I am 40 something. At that time, I was in my early 40s. I'm 40 something years old. And yes, you are my mother, but you will not talk to me that way. And every time you choose to talk to me that way, then there will not be a conversation. But when you're ready to have a logical conversation with me, then I'm here all day long. And so when you tell people how they are going to treat you and what you will and will not accept, and every time they step out of those boundaries that you set, then if you sit there, you're saying, it's okay for you to continue to give this toxic behavior to me. But if you set the boundary and they break the boundary, then there has to be consequences for the boundaries. And when we talk about consequences don't have to be me fighting you, busting you upside your head. Do you know when you walk away from somebody, that hurts them more than anything that you could have done to them? It's like
because in a way, if you yell at them, at least they've got something to attach to blame you for. But if you leave them with the consequences of their behavior, now they're stuck with it, because now it's like, no, you do this and that's the consequence, and that's okay. I'm not going to fight you there. I love it. I mean, it's very much in line with articulating in more clear detail what I said a little bit earlier, is that's where you didn't avoid the contact with your mom. You actually took responsibility for what wasn't acceptable in your life. And that's one of these things that's a nuance in life that I see if someone hasn't been able to make peace, because in order to do that, you've had to make peace that you might not be in a relationship with your mom. You might not talk to her. She might, I don't know how it is, disown you or whatever she might do. So there has to be a freedom inside of a person to do the thing that you did, because you have to be okay with all the consequences.
I did. And when I got as I just bought a brand new car. So I got in my car and I'm just driving like, ooh, ooh, ooh. And, I felt good, but I knew that she would eventually call. And when the person calls, that's when you reiterate again.
Yeah.
This is what happened. And this was the result of your actions. So now next time they're going to think twice. And I know this firsthand. And let me tell you, I dated a guy that was younger than me. And
how much younger? Give us the juicy detail.
7 years. And so because I was still mentally abused, right?
Yeah.
I was just like, you can't tell me what to do. You can't teach me nothing. And so I cursed on the phone, and he says, he told me early on, 3 strikes and you're out. And I was like, whatever. And he say, 2nd strike. And then we go on. So this particular day, I don't know what I was going through, but I did it again. And he said, that was the 3rd strike. So I told you that you will not talk to me that way. And I was like, I'm grown. He's like, bye. And that was it. It was 3 weeks later before he talked to me again. But do you know what happened after that? I've never cussed at the man again. No.
Yeah.
So you have to learn how to set boundaries.
It's like you train the behavior. There's something that our friend Bolalang, who also mentioned something earlier, he's in South Africa. He's our third guest host, who's never here, but he participates in every show. It's interesting that Erica and you, Andy, managed to set boundaries with your partners later in life. Parents, sorry. An opportunity I never had with my father. I'd like to touch this one for a minute, because this is fascinating. And it's a paradox that I don't know if we can get into it. Bambos might already know where I'm going with this, but I don't like to think in terms of boundaries. And there's a reason why I don't, because in a weird way, boundaries is already pushing the person away. So it's already creating some of the tension that I don't need or want in my life. Mm-hmm. And what you described for me could be seen as a boundary, but I'd like to also propose another way of seeing it. It's the thing in my life that I want to aspire to have or to be. Mm-hmm. So when you say, you don't talk to me that way, that's the one side, which is the no, don't talk. But the other side is, and I want to be in relationships that are respectful, that are loving, and that are conscious of the other person's feelings. And that, for me, is a very different energy. And if there's not a bit of both of those energies, I see that a person will often create they might set the boundary, but it gets so messy. because it's about you. It says you can't do this, or you shouldn't do this to me. There's blame. There's a little bit of blame that's in it.
Yeah. But when you are giving your explanation of this is what you shouldn't do, or this is not what I am going to accept, but you also give a corrective action in there.
Yeah.
So our conversation would have been a lot differently if you talk to me in this way, or whatever works for you, but you have to give them a positive feedback. So you can't just throw a negative at them and then they be like, huh. But if you give a positive, when you take that time out, now they thinking about that positive, like, dang, I miss her or I miss him. And I want to be a part of their life. So now you've really already given them the answer. This is what you need to do to be a part of my life. And so now they just conform it into their own way, not verbatim word for word. But when you guys are able to have another conversation, they're able to think about, you was right. I was wrong. I apologize. I shouldn't have did that. And then you guys, okay, bet. Let's move on. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And we had a fantastic guest on some weeks ago, I guess now.
Who was that?
Homeless to Harvard.
Oh, yeah.
He was on Ivory Tower's TV show. And he told us, because he said that when he speaks to his Black friends, then he'll speak totally different than if he's speaking to us. So when you're speaking to us right now, are you speaking totally different than if you had your Black friends around?
Yes.
And so help us understand, how would it be different? What would one sentence be that you might say with us now that would be totally different if we were Black?
Well, I have 3 tones.
Okay.
And one, we have my interview tone, which
by the way, is this called code switching? I think that was a word he used.
Yeah, pretty much. So then you have my direct team, like my team, that I speak Ebonic to them. Okay. Now, my Black friends that are not part of my personal world, I still speak to them the same way I speak to you, but there may be just like a difference of words. As far as professionalism for me, whether you Black or white, I'm still going to be professional.
It was such a joy to have you here today. So
yeah, it was really beautiful to have you.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here. It was so relaxing. And normally I'm doing like 30-minute shows and you got to kind of get it all out. And so it was very refreshing to take my time and go through all of the content and the information so that hopefully it's really, truly blessing somebody. And so that someone can possibly see themselves in the story that we've all shared and start their path to their healing process. And so that when they come out on the other side, they can look like me or you or you.
Can you give us a glimpse of your book?
Exactly. I was going to ask, can you kind of put the book and then name it so that people who are listening on the podcast have a chance?
Yeah. So the book is The 7 Techniques of Healing. Everybody can go to my website, ericalynnspeaks.com. And on the website, there's a link to where you can get the book from. Also, I am releasing my online group coaching program called the One Step Beyond You Signature Program. So this program is designed for people like yourself and me and many others who really want to play big in their life, but they have issues that is causing them from being stuck. So they want to move from stuck to unstuck. They're tired of being in the emotional bondage. They really, really want a relationship, but they just don't know how. The whole goal is to take you through the 7 techniques, take you through the other course components so that you can primarily heal from whatever the issues is, but then begin to move forward and take action in your life so that you can play big. And you're calling me like, hey, Erica, I'm the CEO. Hey, I started a new podcast. I'm not afraid to get in on TV in front of other people. Hey, Erica, I actually found my voice, or I found peace with myself. And so I'm able to just move forward in my life. And so we would love for people to come on and join the One Step Beyond You signature program. It's a monthly coaching program and it's phenomenal. Like a lot of my clients, they're just like, they're in awe. Like you'll be surprised who some of the people I help.
Yeah. Well, I can already see your energy is contagious. So I'm sure that the people that you are having contact with are getting massive benefits. Thank you for being with us. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really great to be with you.
Thank you for being you.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome.
Nice.
Nice. It's a really fun episode.
Yeah. Where did the tissues go?
I don't know. Were you going to cry today? I saw you getting emotional for sure.
I did cry.
I was crying inside for a while there. It was pretty intense. Erica, I'm sure, has shared that story so many times that she also, it's not all that different than when I would share the story about my mom being killed by the drunk driver. I said it 100 times over so that I almost numb myself to the story. What I forgot or in myself is that actually the story has an impact on others. And especially when I let it have an impact on me again. So the fact that we've got this format doesn't lend itself easily to, we just met her. So it's not like, oh, we're going to potentially have tears and all that. But yeah, it was intense. Yeah.
And we like it that way.
Yeah, we do. Thank you for being with us. It was beautiful to spend another day.
And we'll be with you tomorrow on
A Wonderful
Chaos.
And we like it
that way.
It's a wonderful chaos. We like it that way.